Good morning, everyone. So, I wanted to make a video talking about my first 6 months living in Africa since I repatriated. I spent 6 months living in Nairobi, Kenya, although right now I'm currently in the beautiful Kampala, Uganda. And I just want this to be just a organic chit chat of me talking about my experience, my feelings, and what I expect the future to hold. Also, if you see me sweating, no, you don't, okay? It's very hot and humid in Uganda right now, so I am gonna be sweating. But yes, I moved to Nairobi, Kenya last September, and I previously was living in Salvador, Brazil, which, if you're not familiar with Salvador, it has the highest population of Black people outside of Africa. And Afro Brazilians have done an amazing job of holding on to their African roots because there was a very strong African influence in Salvador, which I felt like was a sign and synchronicity that it was time to repatriate because immersing myself in Afro Brazilian culture was very closely related to immersing myself in African culture. When it was time for me to leave Brazil, I was thinking about what area, what country would be the best for me. When I thought about Africa, the first thing that popped in my mind was South Africa. As most people in the diaspora that want to repatriate, I think we either go to maybe Ghana or South Africa or Kenya. I was even looking into Cape Verde. I had heard about Cape Verde when I was a little girl, and for some reason, Cape Verde just really resonated with my soul. So I was really interested in moving to Cape Verde. But the more I researched it, the more I realized it's a very slow paced life. And that's just not the life that I'm ready for yet. I wanted a city that had a little bit more action. I knew that I wanted to move to a big city. And I knew that I wanted to have some levels of comfort that I already had living in Latin America. And so I was torn between South Africa or Kenya. And I decided to pick Nairobi, Kenya because I felt like the environment was a lot more welcoming for me and just resonated with me a lot more. So that's how I chose Nairobi, Kenya. When I had first arrived, I had gotten I tried to be economical. I had gotten an affordable little Airbnb, and then I moved around for a little bit before ending up in Kileleshwa, which is like the expat zone. And I really enjoyed living in Kileleshwa, but I also felt like I wanted a little bit more peace. So that's why eventually I ended up moving to Machakos, Syokimau, Machakos. And that is my happy place. I have an apartment. I am permanently living there, and I plan to live there for the foreseeable future. So, yes, I found my happy place after 6 months. It was definitely a journey, it was definitely an adventure, but everything happened exactly as it should have. As someone who's been living abroad for the last 13 years, I know firsthand that traveling and vacationing is very different from living in a city or a country. When I had first visited Nairobi, I had an amazing time and I fell in love. But then when I moved there, the reality started to sit in, and I started to realize that there were a few cultural differences, and I wasn't very educated on the cultural dynamics and also the political dynamics of Kenya. So that did lead to quite a few culture shocks my first couple months. I would say the first month was kind of like the honeymoon phase. I wanted to see everything, I wanted to do everything, I wanted to go everywhere. And then after that kind of phase ended, I started to experience culture shock as a repatriate, like around month 2 and 3, where I was just like, okay, now I'm starting to see that there are a lot of cultural differences. I'm starting to see that we do think very differently in some ways. And I went through a tough time kind of processing that. And I had made a video talking about my culture shocks. So no need to, if you want to see that video, you can see it because I was very thorough with everything that I was experiencing. But yes, after the honeymoon phase ended, I was kind of forced to sit with myself and realize, like, okay, there are a lot of cultural differences between the diaspora, whether it be Caribbeans or even Black Americans and Africans. And now it's my time to see if I'm able to adapt or figure out what's next for me. There were many times where I questioned if I made the right decision. I'm just being honest with you guys. There were many times where I questioned if I was going to stay or if I wanted to go to a country or a continent that maybe aligned with my beliefs more, but overall, I'm glad that I stayed through the confusion and through the culture shock and through the negativity that I was processing, because I realized that wherever you go, you're going to have to adapt. Wherever you go, not everybody is going to think like you. Not everybody is going to love you. And that's just a part of moving to a new country. And I just can't keep moving from country to country expecting everybody to think like me. So that's where I was at with myself. I really had to sit down with myself and think like, did I make the right decision by moving here? Can I adapt to a culture that is very different from mine? Can I adapt to a culture that thinks differently from me and really just looks at me in a certain type of way as well? When I had first moved here, I was chit chatting with a few people and I was also working with people. And the things that they were saying about my culture did come across as disrespectful to me. The things that they were saying about Black American women came across as disrespectful to me. And it did become apparent that there was a bias that was mainly perpetuated through social media on both sides. Black Americans, people in the diaspora have a certain bias about Africans due to social media and how Africans are perceived in social media. And there's also Africans that have a negative bias about the diaspora due to the perceptions on social media. And so that was the biggest part of my culture shock, is realizing like, okay, there's some negative perceptions that have been taught to us through social media that don't necessarily align with reality. And that was something that I had to accept and adapt to as well. And so that was one of the biggest things that was like tough for me. But then I realized like not everybody thinks like that. There are some very intelligent Kenyans, very educated Kenyans, Pan-African Kenyans, Kenyans that are open minded and accepting and understand that everything they see on social media is not the truth. Everything that they see on social media is not a fact. But I will admit, like, it was hurtful to hear some of the things that some Kenyans thought about Black Americans. And that was an element of my culture shock, like I said. But as time went on, like month 4 and 5, I did start to meet more people that aligned with like my values and my beliefs and actually believed in Black unity and believed in the mission of, moving forward and welcoming the diaspora back. And they understood that the power of social media does not necessarily reflect the reality of the Black community. So I would say 4 and 5 is when it really started to get better for me. And I really started to feel like, okay, like I can see myself living here. I can see myself adapting. And I'm meeting a lot of good people that keep me motivated and help me feel, better about my decision. And eventually, that's also why I decided to rent an apartment. So, yes, I just want to talk about like the mental process that I went through moving here and adapting here as well, because that's the biggest change mentally. The biggest change is adjusting and understanding that there will be some differences. You can't expect everybody to think like you or to love you, but when you find your people, hold on to them tight, because it is very important to find your people and find your community. A few people have asked me about dating as well, and I did just want to touch on that a little bit. As an African American woman, I will say that you will get a lot of attention. There will be men shooting their shots or approaching you, trying to court you. But I also think men just love beautiful women in general. If you're a beautiful woman, it really doesn't matter what country you were born in. You're going to get suitors and courters and men, just seeing what could happen, shooting their shot, etc. But I will say, as an African American woman, it can be a little complex because you do have to be careful about people's intentions. And you do have to use your discernment and your intuition when it comes to the type of energy that you entertain, who you're going to let into your life, who you're going to date, etc. Living in Nairobi for 6 months, I have been on a few dates and I have dated, but I also feel like, again, there's just a lot of cultural differences. And personally, I wouldn't even recommend someone coming to Nairobi and just starting to date immediately. I don't think that that's a wise decision personally because there's so many cultural nuances. If you don't know the local culture, you don't even speak the local language, you're going to be completely out of the loop and you're going to be naive to a lot of cultural nuances. And there are some people that will use that to their advantage as well. As an African American woman, I do think that we have to be careful about men that approach our lives, and we really have to vet them and make sure that they have positive intentions for us and just a pure heart, pure intentions. And so that's why I say, like, take your time. I would say I would recommend just settling down first. You know, when I first got here, there were a lot of men shooting their shot, a lot of men, just approaching me. And that's cool. That was flattering and all. But I also wish that I just would have slowed down and waited until I was settled down before entertaining anybody. I have dated someone and I liked them. And so I decided to give it a chance. And it did get kind of serious, but then it didn't work out. And that's okay. But I also believe that if I would have waited like 6 months or even a year to just settle down and breathe, I could have prevented myself from getting in situations that didn't align with like my best interest, didn't align with like my higher self. And so that's the biggest advice that I can give to women in the diaspora or anybody in the diaspora that is repatriating to Africa. I understand that like the allure of being in a new country can be exciting. I mean, I've been living abroad for 13 years and it was still exciting for me. So I can only imagine if this is like your first country and you just have the allure of wanting to meet people and wanting to see how the dating scene is. But I think the wisest thing you can do is to genuinely build community, build friendships, learn the culture, learn the local language, understand the cultural nuances and the cultural differences before you just download a dating app and just hop in head first, you know? So that's really what I have to say about dating. I probably would do it again one day, but my priority now is self-growth, self-care, building a life that I love, continuing to build a life that I love. Yes, that's all I really have to say about dating. And I also wanted to talk about the different type of tips that I can give people to maybe help them with their like repatriation journey going forward in the future. The number one tip that I can give is to make sure that you have enough money saved up. I will say that when I was living in Brazil, I enjoyed my life there. I enjoyed myself, but I was also very excited to repatriate to Africa. So I didn't save as much money as I should have saved. And in hindsight, there was really no reason to rush. There was really no reason to just, yeah, like I said, rush. I wish I would have saved a little bit more money, especially because when I had first moved to Nairobi, there were some housing issues. Like I had to cancel an Airbnb, I had to book another Airbnb, my money got tied up, and my savings was depleted rather quickly because, my money got tied up and all that stuff. So, yeah, I would recommend just making sure that you have enough money saved up. If you have a job and you have steady income, I would say have at least 5,000 saved up. If you don't have a job and you're just moving to Africa to build a new life or open a new business, I would say at least 20,000. I would say honestly at least 20,000 to repatriate to Africa. That would last you a few months for you to get set up and everything. Also, if you're interested in repatriating to Kenya specifically, please understand that you have to register your business legally and understand the difficulties of the visa process. I will say that is one downside to Kenya. The visas there's not really like a perfect visa just for someone that wants to come to Kenya and be a resident. There is the digital nomad visa that is coming out soon, but nobody knows when exactly that's going to be happening. But aside from that, there's really no visa, especially for young people, to be able to move to Kenya and become a resident. I would highly recommend research the visas, research the resident visas, research the work permit visas, and understand that if you want to come to Kenya and do business, you have to legally register your business because that is something that they take very seriously. And yeah, so I hope this video was, of some value to you. I just wanted to talk about my experience and the mental, physical, and spiritual process of repatriating to Africa. But I do think that this is the best decision that I've made for my life. I do plan to be here for the foreseeable future. And I am really excited to see what the future holds and what unfolds. I'm going to be traveling throughout Africa for the next couple months, and then I'm going to be going home to Nairobi. So make sure to like, share, subscribe, follow my travels, and then continue to follow my repatriation journey. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.